Hey class, in this video I'm going to walk you through part one of our second lab, which is going to be taking a look at the software called Power BI. Power BI is an application made by Microsoft, and in our last lab we were looking at Excel. You can think of Power BI like the charts and graph side of Excel, but on steroids. It's built for creating interactive visuals that help you tell a story with your data. And Power BI is used to make data-driven decisions, to present information in a clear way, and honestly to help convince people, whether it's showing customer profitability or tracking student success across various demographics, or showing the taxpayers what's been done with their tax dollars. These tools help turn raw numbers into something that people can actually understand. And on the lab, I've provided a couple of links for you to take a look at, and perhaps to get some inspiration or just see what these tools are capable of. So I've got one to the state of Michigan. It's a labor market dashboard, and a bunch of these buttons here are going to be Power BI visuals. So if I click on this claims trend, these visuals are interactive. So if I look at this first one here, it says top 5 industries for recent monthly initial claims. And if I select one of these columns for, it looks like the top industry is manufacturing, you can see that the other visualizations actually updated based on that selection. It filtered it and said, okay, only looking at the manufacturing industry, what types of occupations filed recent claims. We can say, okay, most of them were in production and so on. If I go back to the lab, I've got another one here with the University of Texas. It looks like we're looking at degrees awarded by the university, and it looks like it's looking at those degrees across several demographics, as well as the level of the degree and so on. So if I click on one of these demographics, let's say the age of 21 and under, I'm going to see the other visualizations change based on that selection. So it's a tool to allow you to explore data, and it's interactive. You can zoom in on different ideas. Go back to our last one here. This is a community forum link that's provided by Microsoft. So these are users of Power BI. You as a student could upload your stuff here if you wanted and get exposure to it. Perhaps you could show an employer someday. By default, it shows recently posted. I'm going to go to top kudos because these are going to be the higher rated ones. And you can see that here with the thumbs up. And you can take a look at some of these, and you can take a look and see what the software is capable of doing. So let's get back to the lab and get started on it. So if you don't have Power BI installed on your computer, if you go to the home page of the course, there is a course resources button there, and I have provided you with links to the different software applications, including Power BI. So here's the download link. If you look at the system requirements, it says Windows 10 or 11 only. So that means that if you have a Mac or a Chromebook, you're not going to be able to install Power BI on your device. However, if you have one of these devices, you have a couple options. One is to borrow a laptop for free from the GRCC library. Those are limited in quantity though, so make sure that you check in on that right away if that's something you might need. And then secondly, we have this this software called the Student Virtual Lab that you can use. And I'm going to provide a separate video and some links in the course resources that show how to access the Student Virtual Lab. Basically, it's a software server, a computer server that has all the different software applications that you'll need for the class on it. So you'll be able to access the software on your device using that tool. And I'll provide a video of how to use that. But if you want to install Power BI, you have to have Windows, and you can do that through this link here. All right, so assuming that you have Power BI already installed, we need to get some data in order to use it. And before we get the data though, we want to take a look at the business context for the data set that we're working on. So for this one, you're going to pretend like you work for a regional beer distributor that supplies various bars and pubs across multiple states. Our company has collected customer and sales order data, and we need to analyze it. Management wants to better understand customer behavior, product performance, and geographic trends. Our job is to use Power BI to load, to clean the data up a little bit, and to analyze it to uncover some things such as who are our top customers, which products generate the most revenue and the most gross profit, and which states are driving the most sales. So I'm going to walk through all of the steps in part one of the lab, and then part two, you're going to do it on your own. There's going to be some prompts about what I'm expecting, but what you do in part two is going to be very similar to what we did in part one. So to get the file that we need, to get the data that we need, I've provided the link here, and it's like an Excel file. You can click on this download link. Just pay close attention to where it saves, because you're going to need to open it up inside of Power BI in just a moment. And then I already have Power BI installed, so I'm going to pull it up here. And if I type Power BI, it should appear at the top of the list. There it is. All right, once Power BI loads, the first thing we have to do is select a data source. There's a whole bunch of different ways that Power BI can get data. We're going to select Excel Workbook, then browse for our file. We want to make sure that when we do that, we select the correct data file. It's going to be Lab 2 Part 1 Customer Data for now. Once that file loads up, I'll see this navigator window pop up, and I can see that inside of that Excel file there are two tables. There's a customer table. If I click on it, I get a little preview of what it looks like, as well as a sales order table. I'm going to check the boxes next to both of those, and then I'm going to click the load button. All right, so once the tables have loaded, I'm not seeing anything here, but that's expected. I'll come back to why not in a moment. I do see a pane labeled data appeared, and I see those two tables. If I click on the arrows next to each table, what I do see there are the fields within each table. Those are each of the columns within each table, and we're going to be exploring those in just a moment. So the reason why we're not seeing anything in the middle of this page, this is the report view of Power BI, and we haven't built any charts or visuals yet, so that's why it's blank. Basically, there's 5 different views. We are going to be working with the top 3 views. So we're in report view right now. I'm going to click on table view. That's going to look at the actual data within each of the tables. Right now I'm looking at the customer table. Click on the sales order table to see that. And then if I go to model view, I'm going to take a look at that. I'm going to move this table over a little bit. So I'm going to click and drag it just so I can see these lines a little bit better between them. And this is tying into chapter 4 a little bit here with the idea of database design. And what we have with this line is the line is showing that there's a relationship between the two tables. In the customer table, we have a list of all the individual customers that the business has. So each customer is just listed once inside of the customer table, and each customer has a unique ID number that's assigned to them. So each ID number appears once along with the name of that business, that customer. And if I look at the sales order table, this table is looking at all the sales transactions that we had within a period of time. So there's a bunch of details about what was purchased and the date it was purchased, and the quantity that was purchased, the sales price of what was purchased, what we paid to either acquire or produce the product, the cost is there as well, and it looks like some information about the customer. And with the customer, we have 3 pieces of information. We have their the state, the customer underscore ST, that's the state they're located, and then the city they're located, and finally we have the customer ID number. And you notice that customer ID is in both tables. So that's what we have as a common field between the two tables. And that's why the relationship exists. And that's how the software was able to identify it. Even though they are slightly named differently, this one is customer underscore ID and this one customer space ID. So a little bit of difference there. But the software recognized, hey, there's a common field, and it thought there was a relationship. And it properly identified that there's what's called a one-to-many relationship. We can see that with the number 1 here, and then the asterisk refers to many. We also see it over here under cardinality. It says many to one. And the idea behind that is that in the customer table, each ID appears once because each ID is unique to each customer. That's the idea of this table. It's a unique list of all the different customers we have. In the sales order table, this is a unique list of all the sales orders. Well, we can have the same customer buying from us multiple times. And in fact, we hope we do. So this customer ID field may have appeared for the same customer multiple times in the sales order table, thus a one-to-many relationship. If the software hadn't properly identified the relationship between the two tables, we can manually do that by clicking on a field and then dragging it to the common field in the other table. So I'm moving customer ID to customer ID, and then I get a little window that pops up that helps me create the relationship. But because the relationship already exists between the two columns, I'm getting a warning message, and I don't really need to do this, so I'm going to cancel that out. All right, so the relationships between the table and the model view looks good. So now I'm going to go back to table view and just do a little bit more exploring. So it looks like if I take a close look at this data, I've got, the sales order ID for each transaction. I've got the date of each transaction. It looks like the sales employee who handled the sale, the customer ID. We've got the quantity that the customer purchased. We've got a description of what they bought. We've got the price that we sold it to them for. We've got the cost it took us to make it or acquire each unit of product, the state the customer's located, and the city they're located. With the states, I want to take a look at those. Looks like sometimes we abbreviated with 2-character abbreviations, and sometimes we wrote out the states. Missouri, okay, it looks like Missouri was consistently, well, actually not consistently. The abbreviation for Missouri is MO. So sometimes Missouri was written out, and sometimes it was abbreviated. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, we're seeing that with Kansas. And yep, Kansas, sometimes it was abbreviated, it's KS, sometimes it's written out. And it looks like those were the only 2 states that I see that going on with. So I want to clean that up before I get started. So to do that, I'm going to click on the Home button in Power BI here. And then I am going to go to Transform Data. And what that does is it pulls up a tool called the Power Query Editor. This tool is actually available inside of Excel as well. In fact, our Lab 3 is going to have us spending quite a bit of time cleaning up data inside of the Power Query Editor. For right now, though, we're just going to do a couple little cleanups. So we're going to click on the sales order table here on the left-hand side, and I'm going to find that column that contained those states. So I'm going to select that customer state column here. Once that's selected, then I'm going to make sure I'm on the Home tab, and I'm in the Transform group. I'm going to go to Replace Values, and I am going to replace Missouri with the abbreviation of MO. So the value to find is Missouri spelled out, and I'm going to replace that with MO. Click OK, and I can see that those updated. And as we make changes inside of this Power Query Editor, we can see applied steps here, and we just replace that value. So that was taken care of. We're good to go there. And then we want to do the same thing with Kansas. So once again, make sure customer state selected, replace values, type in Kansas, replace it with its abbreviation, which is KS, and click OK. So now those are updated, and it added another replace value to the steps that are listed out here. So now I'm just going to explore a little bit further. So notice that next to the top of each of these columns, when we're in the Power Query Editor, it shows a little icon, and it says 1, 2, 3. If I click on that, it tells me what that means. That represents whole numbers. So sales order ID, those are always whole numbers. That makes sense. For sales order date, I've got a calendar icon. So yep, it properly identified that as a date. Sales employee ID, 1, 2, 3 is a whole number again, so that makes sense there. Same thing for customer ID. Same thing for quantity. For product description, we've got ABC. You can see that stands for, where is it, text. That makes sense there. Now product sales price, if I click on that one, 1, 2, 3, well, a sales price could be a decimal number, but it's saying 1, 2, 3. It's a whole number. It's probably because the data were all whole numbers, but I think that should really be a decimal number. So I'm going to change that one to decimal number. Now it shows 1.2, and that's the icon for decimal number. It looks like product cost per unit. It looks like some of the data might have had decimal numbers because it properly identified that with the 1.2 decimal number icon. Customer state, ABC, that makes sense. Same thing for city. So I think we're good here in the Power Query Editor. I want to close it out, and before I do that, I want to prompt you though that it's going to ask you to save, and make sure you do that. So close that, and then do I want to apply my changes? Sure, yes, I want to save that. All right, so now our data is cleaned up a little bit, and what we're going to be doing here as far as visual is I want to look at the total revenues and the gross margins for each product line. I want to look at revenues across states and across customers and so on. And right now though, I don't have the revenue actually in total for each of these sales orders. I've got the selling price and I've got the quantity sold, but I don't have the total of the revenue from that order. And the same thing for the cost. If I want to calculate margins, I need to know about costs in total. I've got the cost per unit, not the cost in total. So I think what I want to do to start here is I need to add a couple columns to this sales order table that don't exist so I can start to do some of those visualizations. So to do that, I want to make sure that I'm in the table view and I'm looking at the sales order table, and then I'm on my home tab and I've got this calculations group, and in there I've got a button for new column. So I'm going to click on that. So I added a column. It's blank right now. I'm going to give the column a name here. I'm going to call it sales. And I'm going to hit equal sign, sales equals, and then I'm going to do the calculation here. And when I do that, I have to name the table. And this table is called sales order table. So I just start typing that. And as soon as I do that, I can see, oh, yep, there's sales order table. And then I see all the different fields within it. And if I think about how to calculate sales for each invoice, I'm going to take the selling price for each product. So product sales price. And I'm going to multiply that by the quantity. So to pull up the quantity, I have to type the name of the table again, sales order table, and then I'm going to look for a quantity here. So it's sales order quantity sold. It's the name of the field. And to multiply, I put the asterisk, the star in between the price and the quantity. And I hit enter. And I can see now that that column is filled with values. And if I do a little mental math there, I can verify it. So the quantity sold for that first row was 10, and the product sales price was 95. So it multiplied it out. 10 times 95 equals $950. That looks correct there. So I'm going to do something similar with the costs. So I'm going to go back to my home tab. I'm going to add a new column. I'm going to call it cost equals, and I'm going to have to reference that same table again. So type in the name of the table, sales order, and now I'm looking for the cost, product cost per unit, and I'm going to hit the asterisk again to multiply that by the quantity. So to find the quantity, I type the name of the table, sales order table, find the quantity, sales order quantity sold, select that, hit enter. And now the cost column's filled with values, and I can do a little mental math on this first row to verify it. Took the quantity sold of 10 multiplied by the 57 product cost per unit equals 570. It looks like it did correctly. And then finally, I make sure I'm on my home tab. I'm going to add one more new column, and this one I'm going to call gross margin. Set it equal, and then I'm going to refer to the two columns that I just created. I'm going to take the sales for each row and subtract the cost for each row. And these are in the sales order table, so I have to name the table first, and then I can find that field, sales, the one I just created, and then I'm going to hit the hyphen to subtract, and I'm going to subtract the cost. And once again, I have to name the table, and now I find that field for cost, hit enter, and I can do a little mental math on that first row. The sales were 950, the cost was 570. 950 minus 570 does equal 380. The gross margin is calculated correctly. Oftentimes we spend a bunch more time cleaning up data and doing calculations before we actually get involved in the visualizations. We have to have the data properly formatted and organized and calculated so that we're ready to do our visuals. So now we're ready to do some visuals. So I'm going to switch my view on the left hand side of the page here back to report view, and now I am going to do some of the visuals. And the first visual, we're going to do 3 or 4 different visuals with this one. The first one I'm going to do is going to be looking at the sales and gross margin by our different product lines. And to do that, I am going, since it's sales by product, I'm going to click and drag sales to this pane here, to this canvas, and it created a visual there. And I can click and drag, and I can move this visual around. I can click the corner and drag and stretch it out, make it larger or smaller. But right now it's not doing much. It's summing all of the sales for all of the transactions in the sales order table. And I want it by product, so I need to do stuff to make that happen. So once I had clicked and dragged that field and brought it to this canvas, notice that in the visualizations pane that under the y-axis it now says sum of sales. So yeah, I wanted that, but I also wanted to show gross margin. So I'm going to click gross margin and drop it in the y-axis as well. So now I've got the total sales for all the sales orders as well as the total gross margin for all those orders, but I want it by product, so it's not doing that yet. So I've got to do that. Well, the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to put each of the products on the x-axis. So if I go back to my table view and look at where the products are described, and it looks like products are here: pale ale, imperial IPA, and so on, under a field called product description. So now I know where that's at. So I'm going to go back to my report view, and I want the product description to show up on this x-axis. So I come over here to my data, find product description, I click and drag and drop it right on x-axis, and now I'm seeing those individual product lines being described. Now some are being cut off, so I might grab the corner of that and stretch it out a little bit to make that look a little bit better. And now I'm just going to clean this graph up a little bit. I don't like these labels for the axis titles. I don't like the title of the entire chart. And also, I don't see dollar signs here. I'd like to see some of those. So I'm going to clean this up. So to do the formatting, in the visualizations pane, if you click on this button, this is how you do your formatting. And I'm going to clean up those axis titles, I guess, first. So I'm going to click on the x-axis, and then I'm going to click on title under x-axis. You can see it's set to auto, and I'm going to just have it say product. And if I click off there, I see, oh, yep, it's updated there, so that's looking better. I need to select that visualization again, and then go back to my formatting area, go to my y-axis, go to the title there, and these are showing, the vertical axis is showing the sales and the gross margins. So I want to probably just say something like amounts in US dollars would be a good label for that, I think. And then this chart title, I want to fix that. So click on the chart again, back to my formatting. And the chart title is actually under the General tab. And then title here. And I'm going to clear that out. And I'm going to say sales and gross margin by product. And it's updated now, but I don't like that it's not centered. So if I scroll down a little bit, I've got horizontal alignment. I can center it there. This is looking better. Oh, so these amounts, if I look at the vertical axis, it doesn't have dollar signs, and if I mouse over any of the columns, I can see the sales there from Imperial Stout, but it's not formatted with dollar signs. So I want to clean that up. So I am going to go to data format, and it says apply settings to sum of sales. Well, sum of sales is one of the things that we're showing in the graph, so I do want to format that as a currency. And now I'm seeing dollar signs there, and I mouse over it, I'm seeing the dollar sign there. And then I also want to do that with gross margin. So from this apply settings to, I'm going to select sum of gross margin from the drop down and format that as currency as well. So now this graph is looking a little bit better. And I forgot something very important here. Because I have many students turning these reports into me, I want to make sure that the title of each visualization shows your name. So I'm going to go back into that and change it. So make sure I'm on my formatting tab here, and then general, title's right there. I'm going to go to the end of it, and I'm going to put my first and last name in the title of the chart, and there it is. So make sure that you do that you got your names in each visualization that you do. All right, the second visualization that we're going to do is going to look at sales and gross margin by our individual customers. So once again, I'm going to click and drag sales and drop it onto the canvas there. And I want to show it for each individual customer. So I'm going to go to customer name here, and I am going to click and drag that and drop it on the x-axis. So now we've got the sales by all our individual customers listed out there. If I make this a little larger, I can see, oh man, there's a lot of different customers. This might be a little too much with all these different names in there. I don't know that I want that. So I think what I might do is filter some of them out, and maybe I only want to show customers that have over a certain amount of sales. So I'm going to do a little bit of a filter. All right, so we can see that there are filters applied on this visual when this visual is selected, and right now it's showing sum of sales is all. I'm going to click on this arrow to expand this out, and I only want to look at the customers that had 4,000 or more sales. So I'm going to change that to greater than or equal to, type in 4,000 and hit apply filter, and now I've got those customers that had 4,000 or more sales. So now I'm just gonna clean this visualization up a little bit. It doesn't have to be that large. Just want to make sure all the names appear. Customer name, that's a pretty good description for the horizontal axis. For the vertical, I'm going to say amounts in US dollars again, and then for the title, actually I wanted to say sales by customer, but also I wanted to show gross margin by customer. I almost forgot. So to do that, I come over to my data here, click and drag gross margin to the y-axis, and now I've got both sales and gross margin for each of those customers. And now I can clean this up. So I'm going to leave the horizontal label, but the vertical label I'm going to change. I'm going to have it say amounts in US dollars, and then the chart title, I'm going to change that. And to do that again, you go to format your visual, you got your access titles here, and then under the general tab, you got the chart title there. So I am going to save us some time in video, and we're going to do the same kind of thing that we did in our previous visual. All right, I've got the access titles and the chart title renamed. Make sure to put your name in the chart title for each visual. One other thing that we can change here that you might want to is the way that the values in the legend are labeled. And to do that, if you select your visualization and you go to these are on the y-axis in this chart. So I'm going to go to my y-axis and I'm going to click on the little arrow for sum of sales. I'm going to rename for this visual. So I'm just going to call it sales. And then the same kind of thing for the gross margin here. Rename that to gross margin. All right, there we go. And I could do the same thing if I wanted to for this one as well. So I got those legends updated. Maybe I don't like the position of the legend, so I can move that around as well. So if I select the visual, go to my formatting, and then legend, the position by default is top left, and I can move it wherever I want. So maybe I'm going to go bottom center. I don't know if I like that. Let's go bottom right. Yeah, that's a little better. Maybe I'll do the same thing with this one. Change the position to bottom right on that one as well. And we're good to go. All right, except a couple of the names, or one of the names is getting cut off a little bit. So I guess I'm going to make it a little bit wider. There we go. So the next one's going to be looking at sales across different states, and for this one I'm going to use a filled map. So I'm going to click on that button, that icon for filled map, but before I do that I want to make sure that I'm not changing any one of the visualizations I already have. So I'm just clicking in the pane here, and then I'm going to click on that map. Oops, looks like I accidentally added another one there. Okay, so now I click on that visualization of the map, and for the locations, I am just going to focus on customer state. I'm going to click and drag and drop that into location. And if I look at that, it looks like even though all the locations were in the US, it inappropriately identified NE for Nebraska as an abbreviation for a country in Africa, probably Niger, I'm guessing. And then let's see, for South America, it looks like Arkansas, maybe Argentina there. So I'm going to need to address that. So to address this, I need to get back to the table view. And then I'm going to click on that column with the customer states. And then I'm going to click on column tools, and in the data category I am going to select state or province. So now if I go back to my visualization of that map, I can see, yep, sure enough, it's showing states in the US. But it's not doing like a heat map showing, some states had more sales. So I need to dress this up a little bit and get it to do that. So now to get the actual sales value into the visual here. Right now I only just have locations. I'm going to click and drag the sales field from data into tooltips. So now the visual is pointing to the sales, but it's still not doing a heat map. So to do the heat map, we can click on the visual, make sure it's selected, format the visual, and go to fill colors. And then I'm going to click on this FX, which is for conditional formatting. And from here for the format styles, I'm going to select gradient. And then you can change these colors up if you wanted. It's going to go from white to dark blue. You could change it to something else. It's really up to you what you decide there. I'm going to go with some purple and click OK. So now it is doing a heat map. So if I mouse over the states, you can see which states had the highest sales there. And finally, for this visual, I'm just going to change the title up here. It should be sales by state. So once again, I click on the visual, click on the formatting button, general tab, and title. I could type that title in. All right, I got that map looking better. If I want to zoom in a little bit, I can use the mouse wheel and zoom in. I think maybe build a double click possibly to zoom in too. That's up to you, but you can zoom in or zoom out as you need. So that's our third visual, and now our last visual is going to be a matrix that's going to list out our different customers, and we're going to be showing the sales, the gross margin, and the gross margin percentage for each of those different customers. And if we look at our data, we have sales and we have gross margin, but we do not have gross margin percentage. And if I tried to add another column to the sales order table, what that would do is it would calculate the gross margin percentage for that individual sales order. And if you think about that for a minute, if I tried to sum that, that wouldn't be correct for the gross margin percentage across customers. Also, an average of that wouldn't be correct either because not all of the sales orders were for the same dollar amount. So it'd be more like a weighted average, which gets more complicated and the software is not programmed to do. So this is where we need to do what's called a measure inside of Power BI. We have to write a formula called a measure. So in summary, we use columns for row level math like sales or cost per transaction, but we use measures for things like percentage metrics or ratios that need to be calculated after summing. I know that's a little complicated, but yeah, sometimes it can be a little tricky deciding whether a measure is appropriate or whether a new column would be appropriate, but a measure is appropriate here. So before I create this fourth visual, which is going to be a two-dimensional table, a matrix, I'm going to have to do I'm going to have to create a new measure. So I'm in my home tab, I'm going to click on new measure, ask for a name of the measure here, just gives the default name. I'm going to call it gross margin percentage. I'm going to set it equal. And now I sort of have to think through how I would calculate that. So I know I would divide. So I'm going to start with that keyword here, divide. And you can see it's a keyword because it put it in the blue font there. And I'm going to put a parenthesis there. I'm going to divide, and I'd be dividing the gross margin for each customer. So to pull up those gross margins, I have to refer to that table, but I'd be actually summing them for each customer first. I wouldn't do it for each transaction. I want the sum of the gross margins for each individual customer. So I'm going to type the word sum, which once again, that's a keyword there. So Pulls it up, and now I'm going to refer to my table. So got the sales order table, and I'm looking for the gross margin, selected that. And then I have to close out the parenthesis for the sum function. So put a parenthesis in there to close that out. You can see the matching color of that parenthesis to see that one's closed out. And then this divide requires commas between the numbers that are being divided. So I'm going to type a comma. You can see the syntax. Its divide function is numerator, comma, denominator. And now I'm going to describe the denominator. So to get the denominator here, it would be the sum of the sales. So I'm going to type the word sum and hit beginning parenthesis and then look for the sales field. There it is. Then I'm going to close out the parenthesis for sum, and I can see up they color code match them. And then I have one more parenthesis to close out for the divide function, and it color codes those in yellow. So I think we're good to go. I'm going to hit enter, and I don't see any error messages there, anything like that. So I think we're good to go. Alright, so now I'm going to add this two-dimensional table called a matrix. So if I move my mouse around the visualizations, I can see, oh, yep, that's the one that's called a matrix. So, oops, I applied matrix style to my other graph. I want to undo that. Click outside of that visualization, now select matrix. There, I've got a table started. Now I got to think about what I want in there. Well, I want the customer names for rows, and then I want to show, I said the sales for each customer, so those are going to be values. And then I also wanted the gross margin. And then finally I wanted the gross margin percent for each customer. So I clicked and dragged all of those for the values. Now in this one, in this matrix, I want to format the sales and the gross margins as dollar amounts, and the gross margin percentage I want to format as a percentage. And because I've got different formatting on these different columns, I can't format them in the same way that I formatted the values in these other visuals. So what I have to do for this one is go back to the actual table view and pull up my sales order table. Then I'm going to click on the column for sales, because that's one of them that I want formatted, and I want it formatted with a dollar sign. So I'm going to select currency there, and then I'm going to do the same thing with gross margin. I'm going to select its format as currency, and then that measure that we created earlier, put it inside of the customer table. I can see it here, gross margin percentage. So I'm going to click on that. And for that one, I want it expressed as a percentage. So once that gross margin percentage is selected, I'm going to go to format here, select percentage, and it's going to do 2 decimal places. I'm just going to roll with 1. We should be good to go. So I'm going to go back to my report view, and now, yep, it looks like those values are presented in the way that I want. Now, there's a long list of customers here, so if I click and drag and make this a little bit bigger, maybe I'm going to move it around a little bit. Let's see if I can get this to all appear on one page. It looks like that scroll wheel is pretty long though, so you go down to that dotted line there, and I'm still not quite showing all of them. So for this one, I might want to copy the visual and maybe paste it here on the second page. So to paste it, I thought I could right click, but I can't. I'm in my home tab, I got the paste button. So now I can click and move this around as needed. There we go. And I can make it larger and fit all those customers in there. So now they're all listed. And since I don't really need it on page 1, I'm going to select it and just hit the delete button on my keyboard, get rid of it there. And now I've got 2 pages of visualizations. For this one, again, I want to see your name. So go to formatting and general, and then we're going to turn the title on, and then we can type in a good title here. So I called it Sales and Gross Margin by Customer, and I remembered to put my first and last name in there. And then I should probably go back and do that with the map visual, because I forgot to do that as well with my first and last name. All right, so that's all we need to do for lab 1, other than we need to capture these visuals and put them in a Word document. So to do that, we can use a tool in Windows called the snipping tool. So if I type in snipping tool down here, this is a screenshot tool, so I hit the plus button there, and then I can click and drag for the areas that I want to do the visuals. It copies it to the clipboard automatically. I'm going to pull up a blank Word document here, and then I can come in here and I can paste that, and then I'm going to go to page 2 and do the same thing, pull up that snipping tool again, and hit the plus button again and do another screenshot, and then I can put that visual inside of this Word document. This Word document, you are going to save and submit it when you're done with this lab completely, which means that you also need to go through part 2 of this lab. Part 2 of this lab is going to be having you do similar tasks, but you're not going to have the video guidance. You're going to have to recall and figure it out. Of course, I'm there if you need help at all. But it's going to be similar. It's going to be looking at vendor data for the regional brewery. It's looking at vendors of hops, and you're going to evaluate which vendor we should go with based on some criteria. As always, if you have questions, need help, please reach out.